Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And for the next year, I'll be teaching entrepreneurship from Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome our guests, Julie Barlow and Jean-Benoit Nadeau, authors of Going Solo. Welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yep.
Well, let's start off by you both telling us your background professionally.
Okay. We are, it's fun to hear ourselves described as entrepreneurs. We're writers with a writing business we've been running for 30 years, I guess. We are, each of us, authors, journalists, but of course, we've had to branch out over the years as translators. We've made radio broadcasts. We've written TV scripts. We've done quite a bit of stuff. We've taught and coached. And I guess, yeah, we have 15 books together and separately and in collaboration with other people under our belts. And I guess that's it in a nutshell. So we're creative.
How did you two meet?
At university, at McGill University here in Montreal.
First day, first class.
Because you mentioned that in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. We were studying political science together.
Very, very nice. So why did you write this book? And especially if it's kind of straight from the past types of books you've written.
When I began as a journalist, I had a lot of questions. And I realized giving seminars and giving lectures later that I could help a lot of other people starting their businesses just by teaching or explaining the problems I had to solve and the quick fixes. And one of the first hurdle I had was just understanding that no paycheck would come, that I had to bill. And that I was a business. That was a paradigm shift, literally. It was a leap I had to take, and because we've always been trained, all of us are told, study well, you're going to get a good job. Study well, you're going to get a good job. And then when you become to earn a living as a creator, you realize there will never be a job. There will always be work. But you will not get a job, or maybe a contract, but or you'll go from contract to contract, but you're lucky if you're going to get a job.
So we both of us, we had the good fortune of Jean's father being an entrepreneur, being the founder of an engineering firm here, and giving us very good business advice. And we realized that it's very unique, for creators like us to develop a sort of good business sense. And that's where the book came from. And the book is really tools for people, in creative fields or whatever fields. I mean, all entrepreneurs are creative in a way, but they're really like the basic tools from the beginning of the whole process of, how to turn your passion into a business. And and
we were invited in chambers of commerce to speak, and realized quite rapidly that the problems we faced as writers, creators, are the same problems that people starting a dog grooming business or a consultancy or graphic design or whatever
architects, anybody who sends a bill.
They all have problems with basics of business like research and financing and managing and taxes. That's the problems are the same. Yes, my daily job of a writer is very different from a dog groomer, but everything around it is pretty much the same processes, really. So,
I would say you're definitely both entrepreneurs, because every time you launch a book, it's like a new venture.
It's entrepreneurial in essence, yes.
Yeah.
I once wrote a column because I've done 25 startups, but I wrote a column on spy novelists, spy and mystery novelists. I went to a conference. And so when you think about it, you have to write a plan for every one of those books, who your target audience is. and you have to, your product is the actual book. Then you have to figure out all the channels you have to go to, and everything, just like marketing any other type of product, you have to do that. And so you become very adept at it. And I thought the formula you have in the book is right on. It's very much appropriate and very useful for anybody who's thinking of starting a consultancy or any type of business. How do you define self-employed? Is it like a full-time thing? Is it a part-time thing? How do you define it?
Self-employed is defined by tax law. So, a person who's self-employed owns their means of production and controls their time. So, I mean, it can be anything, it can be, you can be a full-time self-employed, you can have a job and also be self-employed on the side. I mean, the book is very much written for people who are making it into a full-time job.
Yeah. Although when a lot of people who begin have to begin part-time because they still have to self-finance, right? So you can be part-time self-employed. In fact, self-employed, in French, we say travailleur indépendant. In France, they say that. It's an independent worker. It's a good way of putting it. It's someone who works but doesn't have an employer. So it's a very broad category that historically farmers, for example, all farmers at the basic level are all self-employed. They grow stuff and they sell it and under their name or a business name. Then it's more like aesthetics, really, or a brand. But the basis of it is someone doing business under their own name. That's the basic self-employed person.
Here at Vinh University, we have the only entrepreneurship major in Vietnam, and there are some universities that offer that as well. Do you think about getting a degree in entrepreneurship is worthwhile? Having that as a full-time degree as accountant or management, and does it limit or expand opportunities by getting a full-time degree in entrepreneurship? Because you pretty much learn everything.
Yeah. There's, in every business, when you start, there's a learning curve, there's a startup process, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you learn as you go along. Personally, I feel like I would have benefited from a business degree sometimes, or at least some, instruction in business. I think you would save a lot of time getting your business up and running by getting your head around a lot of things ahead of time.
Yeah. It shortens the takeoff time. It all depends whether you master your basic trade or not. Like when I began as a writer, I had followed no course in journalism. So I had a long learning curve just about the business of writing. But indeed, having had an entrepreneurial training, I would then have learned a lot of tricks concerning finance and sales and
tax and contract
management.
There's a lot of stuff
and development. But development is a subtle thing. I think what we call R&D, research and development. There's a lot to gain. If you do good research around what you're doing, you can get a lot of multiplying effect in your own business. But it's almost an art. You can learn some of the basics of how you develop your idea, of how you reach out to new concepts within what you're doing. But that is an element that I'm not sure it's teachable, that part.
Possibly not. Possibly not.
How do you develop an idea that will, for example, for a writer, that will make you be able to not just write articles, but write books and maybe a documentary,
Multiply your...
Yeah, not sure it's teachable, but recognizing that idea and then knowing what to do with it, that is certainly teachable. And that's one of the things we explain in our book.
By the way, my degree's in journalism, and I found that everything we had to do as journalists was very much applicable to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
especially the resiliency part of doing this.
Yeah.
When did you decide being self-employed is a better alternative to working for someone? And I would like my mom to listen to this because my mom has been saying to me all these years, why can't you get a full-time job with anybody? And of course, now I'm working full-time for a university, but I'm still an entrepreneur.
Well, I was employed 29 days and I resigned because I didn't like it. But in fact, I became self-employed twice. The first time was I had no choice because I was not employable. I was learning how to be a journalist, and I was trying to find my way. Was still studying at the same time. And then 7 or 8 years ago, I had my little business going, but then people found me interesting and offered me a job. I accepted one very great job, best magazine in French in Canada. It's my mother tongue, and after 29 days, I resigned because I said to myself, oh, I just did all that great stuff and now I cannot do it because I have to work for an employer. Mm-hmm. That's when I became self-employed by choice.
Yeah, me too. I started out self-employed right at university because there weren't that many job options for journalism in English in this city, and got things rolling. And then I too was offered a job at a publishing company, and I worked for 2 or 3, no more than that, maybe 6 months. And the problem is that I had other projects that I'd started that were part of my business that I couldn't get to and couldn't, so I left the job and went back to being self-employed. And that too was for me, like the choice, like this is what we want to do. And I guess what we love about it is, freedom is a lot like interpreted as kind of, it's more like the ability to do what we want. I guess that's what's important to us.
Yeah.
And you as a self-employed person, you have to accept the responsibility that comes with that freedom, which is all of the billing and taxes and all the things that are done by a company, but it's worth it for us. It's worth it because we get to do the projects we want to do. We always figure out a way to do them. So and once we realized that, it gave us sort of some confidence and maybe some security. And I don't know, our parents don't care.
And we could move our head office. We spent 6 months in Phoenix, Arizona in 2010. And in 2013-14, we spent a year in Paris. Before that, Julie and I had been in Toronto and France again. So then we came back to Montreal, but we had this flexibility, and that was a long time before video conferencing was easy to do. Yeah. But to us, it was important, and what we did allowed that. The way we were structured.
Should you keep your full-time employment and start a part-time? Like now looking back, and of course never knowing, how much you're going to make in any particular year and the inconsistency of it, would you advise most people to maybe start while they're full-time for somebody else and then launch into it and then gain enough get enough potential clients, or put a certain amount of money away so that if it might take longer than you had hoped? What are you advising people who are thinking about going out on their own?
Everybody who starts a business has to think when they're developing their business plan about how much backup capital or financing they have that they can last while they're in the learning curve of it. So there are in the book, we describe the different ways that you can do that. Some people start a self-employed business indeed when they're still working at their full-time job. It's tough. I imagine it's very tough, but it does provide that security. Some people have a spouse who earns money and they can afford to, take that hit for a little bit and get their business up and running. I started being self-employed at a time when I had very, very little responsibilities. I didn't need much money. That's another way of going at it.
But you had a loving partner.
I had a loving partner who didn't have much money either. So we just figured out everybody has to think of that way. And for a lot of people, that will be, some people take a package from their job that they leave. There's a lot of scenarios, but basically you have to factor in enough support for the time it's going to take, because nothing starts immediately and starts making you money right away. Or if it does, you will inevitably meet one of the slumps that all self-employed workers meet. And, you have to have a backup for that.
But if you have money, the most important thing is go see your banker right away and borrow money or get the credit margin right away, because you are not going to get it when the money is spent.
Yeah, that's a good lesson we learned.
They lend if you have money. They do not lend if you don't. So if you have the reserves, go get more immediately.
I was wondering about that. Do you recommend that people have at least 6 months of running money before they get started? Or if they have a certain amount of money and they can go get a line of credit, that they go get a line of credit and at least give themselves 6 months? What kind of rule of thumb would you suggest that they think about?
I think 6 months sounds reasonable, but it really depends on the business as well.
Yeah.
You got to look at how I think you need to 6 months to a year, I would say. But I wouldn't want that to keep anybody like that sort of sounds like a mountain, I mean, there are many ways around it. And of course, as I just said, if you have a spouse who can pay the bills for a little while, that works too. Yeah. But definitely get a credit line is when you still have money before you run out of money, because banks don't give money to people with no money. They give money to people with money already.
Yeah, of course. They always want to make it's still the cheapest form of getting capital is getting from a bank than somebody investing in you. And you write in the book, if you understand that being self-employed, you summarize it as don't have a job, have to work, don't have a boss, you have clients, don't have a salary, you have an income. Explain what you're telling people there.
Well, we're coming from the mentality, and it's an important theme in the book, that you can't think like an employee when you're self-employed. So, you need to flip your thinking around and think of, because one of the traps that a lot of people in creative fields fall into is complaining about their bosses. I mean, we hear this from other freelance writers, and, feeling very powerless in the face of things. In negotiating contracts in particular, they feel like they have to take what's given to them because that's what the boss decides. And we're trying to flip people around and say, no, you are the boss, they are the client. You are in the driver's seat, and you do decide, what conditions you're going to work for, what you're not going to work for. And you should be going into all of your decisions, especially negotiations, remembering that, you're the boss, you decide. If it doesn't suit you, then you shouldn't do it.
When I began, I began freelancing, totally inexperienced, and was studying at the same time. It took me about 3 years to make a first invoice. So I had been a freelancer for 3 years and made an invoice on the third year, which means for the first 2 years, I was thinking whoever it is will pay me. And eventually they did, because they were looking at their own books and said, oh, this guy didn't bill us, we should pay him. But so that's it. You're not going to get a paycheck. You're getting a check for what you bill, because your relationship with your client is contractual, and you're not going to be unionized. You're not going to be if you're a certain category of self-employed, for example, an actor, you will be protected by a sort of general contract that's negotiated between the union of actors and the film industry. But within that contract, you're still self-employed. It's just a general contract that's negotiated, but that's an exception. It's not the rule.
Yeah, for sure. And it's still such an unpredictable place to be. In the book, you recommend before launching your consultancy that you have a set of objectives. Please tell us about defining them, and should the person have a written business plan and a financial forecast as well? Okay.
The written big formal business plan and financial forecast is useful really if you're looking for partners or an investor or a lender. Financial forecasts can be quite simple if you're not looking for these things. The basic of the business plan, it's important to have a business plan, but it's really 5 questions. It's what you want to offer and what for, the purpose you have, for what price, who are you going to sell it to, and how are you going to pay for yourself before you start generating income or sufficient income to be in the red and not to get out of the red. That's pretty much the basic of the business plan. And I think what for is the most important question, really, because the minute things are going to start going well, you're going to have too much work. And then you're going to have to select, and you're going to want to orient your choices in function of the purpose you have, the goal. You're not going to, the example I like is you want to start a school of social dancing. Well, you're not going to choose your clients, your location, whether you want to start a franchise of business school or win the Olympics of social dancing, or start a franchise of social dancing, or create a shoe for social dancers. You're not going to choose any of the choices you make is going to be different depending on your purpose. But so at the beginning, it's legitimate to be not clear about your purpose, but it's something that's got to be defined fairly quickly.
How do you know if you're cut out to be on your own? Because I think a lot of people, it might not be the best fit for them.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty simple. I think that the people who are cut out to be on their own are the people who don't wait around to be told what to do in general. And if you are a person who's waiting for a structure, who needs a structure, who needs people to tell you how to organize things and what to do and what your project should be, then you're not cut out to be on your own. I mean, if I think of all the people I've met that have been successful over the years in all different kinds of businesses, it's because they know what to do and they know when to do it, or they know when to go and ask. But at any rate,
yeah,
they are people who aren't waiting around for taking orders. And one of the distinctions we make between, you know, what I was speaking about earlier, people thinking about their bosses versus people thinking of themselves as the boss, that's exactly what it is. And the people who are waiting around inevitably get, in our business at any rate, inevitably get exploited by their, if they're not proactive and project driven.
Autonomy would be the key word, I would say.
Yeah.
If you're autonomous, that is capable of thinking a bit out of the box, but on your own, and figure it out, you have a good chance.
And being organized is key.
Yeah.
And you know, I've seen a lot of very talented writers. I've seen their careers as freelancers implode because they can't organize things. And people think of us, in particular, of creative people, as, you know, free spirited, living by the moment. But oh my gosh, we have to be organized to make it work. Folders,
yeah. Folders,
Excel sheets. You know?
Well, I think you have to be very disciplined, as I found over the years, to be out on your own. Do you agree with that?
Yep. Discipline is another.
A certain amount of discipline, but at the same time, you have to be open to things. You know, you have to know when to stop. You have to know when to let up. You have to know. You have to take holidays. You have to know when to take your foot off the gas pedal. You know, in order to let opportunities come. It's important.
But I've known, like, a lot of people have gone into especially consulting, and they get one big client. It could be even their own former employer. And then they don't look for other clients. And when the gig ends, then they're panicked because they have no income coming in on it. And so they're not used to actually having to go out there and do the business development. And while you have the one, you got to start generating more clients and end up taking more people on than you normally than you would normally, only because you don't know when these things are going to end. Do you find that being the case?
Totally. And if you have one client and you're too dependent on it, and something goes wrong, as you said, then you are kaput.
The real security is having, for me, the real comfort. For example, as a journalist, three or four that give me maybe one main one, but two or three that I keep not in the back burner, but active, but not as much. But I know I can if the big one goes down, I can crank up the other ones. I just have to say yes more.
And we don't always systematically choose the highest paying people either.
No.
We're looking for, running a business is not just about getting the most money per hour at the moment. We have people who are regular clients. We have people that I can call up and ask for work when I need it to fill a spot. They're not the best paying people, but they're always there, So there's a real variety of things that you need to keep it going. And you need that overlap. You need other clients that you can kick in when a big client stops, or seizes up for whatever reason. It's happened to us. Some of our biggest clients have, shocking things happen, and people change their jobs too. You can develop a relationship with somebody at a certain company and off they go. And the person who replaces them is not interested in your work. I mean, it happens a lot. So you need to have that overlap and flexibility. And it's all about building relationships and keeping those relationships up with a variety of people. So it's important.
Sometimes I have a client, for example, I have a very high paying client, very prestigious, and I have another one that's quite good, but doesn't pay as much. But actually, the one that doesn't pay as much is quite good because it takes me no time to do the work. Yeah. So in the end, it's a factor of and we're coming here into negotiating, but price is not necessarily the only thing that is important when you consider a client. It's also how much work it will take to do the same amount of the same result, and all of this has to be factored in. And but keeping a couple is important, at least a couple. But that's also why when you count your unit price or your hourly price, when you figure it out, you must not count it on the basis of 40 hours a week, because your billable time is not 40 hours. You have to do all these other things. Financing, managing, and all that. That takes time in the week. So you have to work your productive time, your actual time that where you're getting billable is about 2/3 of your time at the most. You always have to bring in 1/3 of the time that's going to be all the other functions of your business. And if you neglect them, you're going to, in short order or long order, you're going to have trouble. So you have to keep maintaining that 1/3 of your time doing that stuff and doing it well. And in fact, the better you do it, the more you earn and the longer you last.
Mm-hmm.
You recommend, before launching, talking to your potential customers. How should you approach them? What do you say? And do you write them first or do you call them?
Well, the ways of approaching people have changed, and I would say it depends on their age. Younger customers, you would text them sometimes today, email them or call them, it depends on
social networks.
Social networking. Yes. I would recommend definitely reaching out to them. The kinds of questions, you need to have a good feel for whatever market you're going into. And the best way to do that is to talk to potential clients or, competitors in your field and ask them about the prices and the conditions. And, you pick up all the knowledge that you need to be able to make your business plan, essentially, to anticipate how much time you'll need to get going, what the pros and cons are of any field.
That's when conventions are very useful. And I would advise anyone starting, go attend a convention in the field, whatever it is you feel you want to be.
Or networking in any way, but certainly,
That's when you meet peers, you develop personal relationships, even with competitors, or potential competitors, and you develop ties, and the friendlier people are, the easier it is to approach them and ask for either a favor, for information, quite sometimes detailed. And I found potential competitors, like other journalists, very useful when I began. The best ones I realize now, were the ones who had been asking questions when they were beginners.
And one of the keys is that, and I'm always happy to help out young journalists who come to me and who may be considered competitors, because it's great to have people that you can refer clients to when you don't have time to do work for them. And that's added value to me as a writer, the fact that I have this network and that people can call me. If I can't work, I can find someone for them to work. Stuff comes back to you. You recommend somebody for a job, they'll probably think of you when another job comes back that they can't do. And it's a great way to.
What do you typically keep for a referral fee? If you send them a contract, how much do you ask because you've made that referral?
Never thought that I
Never
could
thought
ask.
I would ever ask for money for a referral ever. I feel like we have a moral bond that, something will come back to me at some point. It's about expanding my community among the writing community as well. So no, I would never. I suppose it's a practice in some businesses, but definitely not in ours.
If someone asks me for an idea that they want to propose to someone, there I'm going to ask for a cut on what they do. But in terms of exchanging contacts with other people, I've benefited from it, and I consider that I give back to the community.
What are the biggest mistakes you've made, and what have you learned from them going on your own?
Yeah, I guess I just finished writing an opinion piece that'll be coming out on how to avoid bad clients. And, 8 ways to avoid bad clients. And I've learned over the years from experience. And one of the biggest mistakes that you make, as particularly when you're a younger professional in any field, is, you're a little desperate for a contract and you're willing to say yes to things that maybe aren't a good idea and are going to be worth less in the long run than you think. And I had a very lucrative ghostwriting project that I said yes to, and I ignored my own advice. The way to avoid bad clients is to think ahead of time and make sure, one of the first things you have to do is make sure that their expectations are realistic about what you're going to do, and that they understand what they want from you. And I just ended up with a client who wanted to write a kind of book and had no idea how to do it, and didn't understand the process and wouldn't let me do my job. And it just turned into a whole bunch of stress for, a very good fee that in the end I wish I hadn't taken. But that kind of thing, learning to spot those kinds of bad clients upstream, that comes with time. You learn to beware of flattering language. You learn to beware of people who don't want to nail a contract down too quickly, because that's always a sign. They're like, okay, let's see how things go. Whenever anybody says to me, let's see how things go, I know it's a bad idea.
Walk the other way.
Or unrealistic expectations. For example,
that was the case.
A client that comes to you and says to us, for example, do you want to ghostwrite a book for me? Oh, and what is it? And they start saying that their book is going to be a bestseller, that will be on the New York Times list and will sell 300,000 copies. And the answer and what we have to right there, we have to stop them and say, no. This is not the reason why you're going to write your book, because it's very unlikely that it will be on the New York Times bestseller list, and I don't want to have that problem. But you see, someone who's a consultant in home design will have these people who have these completely unrealistic expectations about the renovations that they want to do or the value it will add to their house. And if, as a designer, you don't correct that expectation, it's going to be a catastrophe, because you're going to have to run into trouble. So, and I, like Julie, have that my worst problems, I've been not trusting my instinct and going into an assignment with a client who was completely unrealistic.
Or a client who was a friend, because you can get into a trap there when your friend, that's never a good idea. You always have to keep things professional, always, and you learn that in time. It avoids a lot of
I have experienced both. I hired a friend one time to work, and that worked out badly, and ended up having to fire this friend because they weren't as hardworking as I thought they would be. And I think you're right about trusting your gut, because when your gut is screaming and saying, no, 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 do not work with this person. Because I one time worked with someone who had written a book, her own autobiography. And she said, look, I want to know, what are you guaranteeing me in terms of publicity, that you're going to get me into these publications and so forth. I go, there's no guarantee. I don't control these publications. And you knew right away that, one, they didn't really know much about what they were buying, which is the worst type of customer, right? Somebody hasn't bought what you're selling before. And two is, these like unrealistic expectations that you have some control over things that are impossible, like getting them onto the New York Times bestseller list. Just ludicrous.
Every writing client comes with expectations and questions, but if they are open to discussing that and really open to understanding how it works, a whole different thing. But if they persist in this, and are not listening to you, trying to explain the realities of the business, then that's a problem. And that would apply to every business, every self-employed person on earth. It's whether you're a caterer or a shoe designer. I mean, people have to listen, and if they don't listen, it's not good.
Or a client sorry.
Go ahead.
Or a client that wants you to do something that is not what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you're a hairdresser and they want you to groom their dog, it's no. But as a writer, as a journalist, I cannot do write publicity for someone on which I just did a profile. It's against the ethics of the business. It's no. But you have to be able to say no, and saying no sometimes is hard.
And especially if you get if money hasn't been coming in lately, or you're light on clients, or somebody offers you something great, you say, but I can make this work. I can make this work. And and you're deluding yourself to thinking that, hence why you always need to put away enough money that you can walk away from anything.
Yeah.
You write about researching your competitors. What kind of information should you be looking for?
I'm sorry, if you're researching
competitors.
Competitors.
I would say that you want to know what it is they do exactly, and you want to know if what they have really is good, whether their clients are satisfied. So that's a very important item.
You want to know how much they charge, because that gives you a good idea of what the market is. So I at the beginning of my career, I certainly was very bluntly asking people how much things paid, and that gave me a good idea of what the sort of upper and lower end of writing fees were.
But you have to understand also what they actually sell. For example, if you want to make documentaries, well, your competitors are other producers, but you may have the illusion that their business is producing documentaries, but it's not. Their business is selling rights. Producing is secondary. Producing new stuff is secondary to the core business of theirs, which is selling rights. Production feeds the rights that they sell. So their business is developing a catalog of rights. So that's what it is about investigating competitors. And sometimes it's just about reading your business journal in your own business, and reading articles about other people, and understanding what they actually do. And what they actually do is not necessarily what they appear to be.
Yeah, sometimes you have surprises.
Yeah. So
in the book, you talk about revising your business plan. How often should you update it? So once a year, every 6 months?
I think it's like a will.
Yeah.
Whenever your situation changes.
Whenever you need it. So, I mean, you were talking about, the fact that as writers, we are creating business plans all the time. And in fact, with each project and each book, it is a little bit of a new business plan. So it's sort of when you need it. But you're not, I think you have to remember, we had a friend we were working with at one point who was a business school graduate who was a little bit like too focused on the business plan, and we found ourselves spending a lot of time creating business plans for different kinds of projects that we wanted to develop. And we stepped back at one point and had to say, we're not getting paid to develop business plans and to refine our business plans. That's not how we're making money. We have to tone it down a little bit and just focus on what we really need. So it's more or less a as needs basis for us. Mm-hmm. In some businesses, I imagine it's probably a good practice to do every once or twice a year, I would say. But again, depends on how quickly things change in your business as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's when do when do you do a reckoning of the situation? Yeah, once a year.
Yeah,
maybe.
once a year.
Yeah.
That's what I do myself. Look at it once a year, more like at the end of the year into the next year. In the book, you mentioned different options about where to work, from a home office to a cafe. What do you do, and what do you recommend for someone starting out, especially, I guess, because you're watching your cash flow as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the basic things about the office, you need to have your equipment around you. You need to have a certain amount of detachment, especially if you're working from home. We have here an office that we designed specifically for what we do. We put quite a bit of money into it because we felt, well, we needed to define a space that was separate from where our kids are. But each office, each business has to decide what's important to them. For us, it's not important to have a fancy place where clients come, because we don't bring clients here very often. But for some businesses, I don't know, lawyers or engineers, people in those sorts of fields, they do need to have a certain standing. They have to have something that looks like they're successful. So they're probably better off to spend a little bit more money on the office. But I would say that the most important thing for us is, having a closed door. It's probably the most important feature of the office for me. And
I personally don't believe in the office, the no office work. I have never met someone who fully does business without a
fixed spot.
Yeah. I have yet to meet that person. I think that there's a fantasy about that idea, but I don't think it exists really. Sometimes you do need to get out of the house and change the air, and it's pleasant to go. I have a reading to do. I can go to the library to do library or to a cafe to do it, but I come back to the office.
You need some kind of predictability in your environment, I think.
As you're starting your business, what kind of website should you develop? Should it be a template from someone like GoDaddy, or have a designer make something unique? And how much should you think about spending on this?
Well, the first question is asking whether you do need a website. Sometimes social networks will do the job. And it depends also what kind of website we're at about our fifth or sixth website.
Fourth or fifth, I don't know.
Oh, and the first one we had was a completely fixed, stable website, the type you did in 2002. And we evolved to the present version, and we almost went to a selling website that was with all sorts of widgets swinging, and then we decided no, we want more of an interactive one. We spent what, $3,000 designing it.
Yeah, we do hire somebody because we have special needs, and I guess that's the answer. I mean, if you have to decide what your website is bringing you. In the end, people can spend a sort of endless amount of time and money on a website, but what does it bring you? And as our businesses become, and our promotion businesses become more oriented towards social media, our expectations of the website have changed, and our next website won't be the same as our last website, because we are more and more, focusing on social media for outreach. That said, everyone, I think pretty much every business needs to have a website. But it's like everything. It's like spending on your office. You need to look at how important it is to spend that money. There are no fixed answers on what you need. It depends on how much money you have and what it's doing for you, what the website is doing for you. And ours is an archive.
We discovered that, for example, after spending $3,000 on a website, that we needed to hire someone $1,500 a year just to ensure cybersecurity. Our website is attacked at the rate of 80 to 200 attackers per day.
Whoa.
I'm not a specialist, but there's people attacking it constantly from a lot from the United States. It varies. Turkey, China. It comes from all over. And so we have someone who handles it. And in our case, we decided to hire that person the third time we were attacked. The third time, at one point, it went under attack, and the site went, and we realized that was so the more complicated and elaborate your website is, the more you're going to be under attack, because people find there's a lot of people who want to try to enter. It's a bit like the machines and in the Matrix, they're after it, and they try to find a way, and it's terrible. So it's a lot of work.
Well, I have to tell you that in Asia, shockingly to me, because I hadn't seen this in the US, a lot of people have been using Facebook and LinkedIn as their websites.
Yeah.
Well, Facebook, speaking of which, we're in Canada, and Facebook doesn't publish media links for us at the moment. So had we relied on Facebook entirely in our present book promotion issues, we would be in trouble. So we've fallen back, and we're using LinkedIn quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, everything's changing all the time. I mean, I think Jean's words, I think keeping it as simple as you can, bearing in mind whatever your goals are, is probably the best answer. And spreading your effort over a few different social media is a good idea, although you have to be careful not to drown in too much. You can spend so many hours a day on social media. It's you got to ask again, what is it bringing me? How am I actually getting money from this? And stand back every now and again and evaluate that. Yeah,
it's you can be swallowed completely by it without generating a cent of income.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question about that, but we have a question from the audience. When you're a startup and going solo, most investors avoid investing in these startups. Any suggestions on what the entrepreneur should do to get investment?
Well, unfortunately, when you begin, it's love money. It depends a lot whether you're starting in a field that's already established or a completely new field that you have to build. For example, now, if you want to be a website developer, it's pretty much established. Nobody's going to question your capacity to earn income. If you wanted to be a website developer 25 years ago, you had to build it. Nobody believed you, So
there's probably a little room for being creative. We needed money at one point to finance a trip, and we realized that the banks don't really understand the writing business. They don't necessarily understand entrepreneurs very well, and we realized that our copyright was actually like an asset. The books that we've published were worth something, and we brought our publishing contracts with us, and it helped loosen the gears a little bit at the bank. Basically, love money is the best way to start, and otherwise you have to be creative about what you own. And so for us, it's copyright. Obviously, we have a house as well that we could borrow on if we needed to. We have real estate that we could borrow on. But when we were starting out, it was
so your residuals, you used your residuals to get lines of credit.
Yes. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I know a lot of people who are self-employed, and actually I know I'm a business writer. I know of entrepreneurs who have businesses with employees. It's incorporated, and they still self-finance with using their credit card. So at one point, the key question for any financier who's going to lend money to you is, how long will it take before you start generating cash? And if the answer is, I'm generating cash already, you probably don't need an outside financier. It's all a matter of how long it will take and how credible you are.
And those are the questions you should be working out in your business plan.
Yeah.
I'm a member of LinkedIn, and so are you. Have you leveraged LinkedIn to build your business? And I get, like you probably do, lots of emails from people telling me how they could help me leverage LinkedIn for businesses.
Yeah, it's tricky. Jean has a huge LinkedIn community. I have a big-ish LinkedIn community. And
how big are your LinkedIn communities, each of you?
22,500
followers.
You have
I have 6,000.
Yeah, I've got 12,000.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Congratulations.
I personally, my use of social media is very one-sided and conventional. I use it as a window, and I that's mostly what I do because my main business is writing for as a freelancer. That's my main source of income, I would say. And so these publications have their own website with their own followers, so I piggyback on that. So, and then when we publish a book, what we want to do is to get good visibility, and again we show that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
my
So-
my use of it is quite
Mine-
one-sided, and I don't respond well to people approaching me about all these opportunities.
But I am, as part of what I do as an entrepreneur is to be constantly on the lookout for training sessions. And I do have one coming up specifically for authors on getting the most out of LinkedIn. So I could swing back to you. But it seems to me that we should be asking you that question, Mark.
Yeah, and I use LinkedIn, and I belong to about 60 LinkedIn groups. And when I'm marketing my program, I use all those LinkedIn groups and hit millions of people, and then you see thousands of people who actually take a look at your posting, and then a certain number who feel they're interested in whatever you're doing come on, and I track where I get everybody who listens to the show, and so some of that definitely helps. A great thing you write about is how to differentiate yourself in a crowded space, and you use communication. I'm using quotes, communication consultant, and the McCain brothers story as examples. Please tell the audience more about how to differentiate yourself if what you do is in a very crowded field.
Well, in our case, early on, for example, in Canada, one thing we did was to develop the business of writing in the two national languages. That's quite rare. There's not many journalists or authors that write in both languages in Canada, even if Canada is officially bilingual. Mm-hmm. So that made us special. And then when we started doing books, that capacity of broaching or bridging the cultural gap between French and English was also an asset. Yeah. So it was to us a good way, but it all depends on your purpose, and I come back to that. If your idea of consultancy is, for example, to eventually be able to work abroad, and not just in where you are in your country of origin, you're going to have to work on specific ideas that will be able to that will be useful for you for that purpose, and so that directs your. So does it involve learning another language? I mean, if you want to live abroad, maybe if that is your purpose, and then if you develop a consultancy and suddenly after 12 or 1500 hours of learning master Arabic, then that's quite specific, and that will take you somewhere, but that makes you rare. So it depends a lot on your purpose. I come back often to that, but it's determinant.
One thing aspiring business owners struggle with, which is creativity. Where does creativity come from, and what if ideas just don't come to you? How do you spark new ideas, and how do you recommend having a journal? Because you talk about that in the book.
I guess the thing about creativity is that it comes at times that you're not expecting it, and you have to create a sort of structure, a kind of corral for it, and you have to make sure you take time. I was mentioning earlier how you can't always have your foot on the gas. Like you need to stop. We get a lot of our creative ideas when we're not precisely trying to get creative ideas, on walks, even on holidays. I mean, when we're cooking, all of these things, but you need to have a place to put them and go to them when you have them. And I think that if people are struggling with creativity, it might be because they're just not, creating that sort of corral for them. A journal, it can be online, it can be written, but you have to get them down. You have to get them down in paper.
Yeah.
I get a lot of creative ideas, when I'm strangely talking to other creators. It's crazy, but at conferences and things, your mind really gets going, and you get a little inspired by things that are going on. Or I'm reading somebody's book and thinking, oh yeah, like that we could do that in this way. And then we have to just make sure that we get them down. And then you need to take the time. You need to really respect that and set aside time, which is not billing time. So we tend to not want to do it, but specific time to, let those things turn into a project, make them into a project.
When I read something, I'm very, very in tune. Or when I converse with someone, I'm very in tune with what this makes me think of.
Yeah.
I have my privileged time for ideas is when I have breakfast. I always have breakfast in front of the newspaper and magazines, and I read them, and I'm active in that process. I take notes. I make notes of what I read and make connections sometimes. And the journal is another step. The journal, Hemingway used to say, if you wait for inspiration, it never comes. Mm-hmm. You have to put yourself in a regular routine of doing something, and when inspiration comes, you're ready. and that's what it is.
And
I agree with everything you've said, because I if I go to conferences, if I read Inc. magazine and Fortune and Forbes, and the more I'm exposed to, the more the popcorn machine goes off.
Yeah.
And all kinds of things. And they're actually apps that you can write your ideas on and save them to the cloud, which is another thing that I do. One of the big questions I have, and we're almost out of time, is oftentimes people get into a new venture with a partner, and usually a close friend, and look at you two have been together for so long. What do you recommend in terms of upfront planning to minimize losing a good friend and or watch the business go up in flames?
Oh, we say at the same time, get it in writing.
Yeah, you need a contract. When you're in business with your spouse, the marriage contract is the basic contract of the business. So it's not a bad one, but you have to think preventively. You have to think about
the kinds of problems.
Anticipate what will be the procedure if you disagree to the point that you have to separate.
Which is like having kind of like a prenup, I guess, for partnerships. I mean, I think it's a great idea, and people don't want to do it because you're in the sort of honeymoon of getting things going. But like a prenup, you should write down a plan for an exit plan. If I wasn't, married to my partner, I would definitely have it in writing. Who takes what when it doesn't work, and how it's all gonna work out. So prevention's the best medicine.
How do you guys, when you are having a difference of opinion, how do you work it out?
Or
is it fall under happy wife, happy life?
Yeah,
I think that's a good question. It was we fight it out.
Yeah, sometimes we have to trash it, but
we have a good agreement to say what we want, be a little explosive if necessary, but never like go to bed mad. Like we have to get it sort of done in a pretty short time frame, and we almost always figure it out. It's
well, that's why you're still married.
That's why we're still married, and that's why we still write books together.
Yeah. You sort of have to recognize sometimes that sometimes you let go. It's not worth fighting sometimes.
Strangely, like we don't like to learn. Like we don't like to realize somebody else is right. That's really tough sometimes. It takes us a while to get, but normally one of us in that case actually is right, and we come around to it. It's a negotiation process.
We're almost out of time, so I have one final question to ask you. How is AI going to affect consulting, especially the freelancer business, and especially for people like you who are writers?
Yeah, I write on AI quite a bit. So my understanding is that it's affecting the kinds of jobs that it's seriously affecting right now are not the sort of lower end repetitive jobs and not the upper end jobs, but sort of stuff in the middle. Middle management and scheduling is becoming very dominated by AI. For me as a writer, it's like a bonus. Like I now have tools that do automatic transcriptions of interviews, automatic translations that provide sort of good first drafts for me. So it's a huge time saver for me right now. And it has not eliminated my business, which is a high-end writing business. So even the people who are using AI, who are using Chat GPT to produce press releases and stuff like that, that's not my business. It might work fine, but if people want very high quality writing, they still know they need a writer. And so it really hasn't affected my business. But it obviously depends on what you're doing. But I would guess most people in self-employed situations offer something quite specific and specialized that AI isn't doing yet.
Artificial intelligence is a misnomer. It's not intelligent. So if it's making, like, for example, conversational AI makes nice sentences. It doesn't tell you it lies. It doesn't tell you it doesn't know. It makes up stuff, and then it takes a good writer to
clean it up.
Yeah,
and
because otherwise it's no good.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time. I love the book, and I hope you have a bigger success with this book than the one that sold 200,000 copies. And it's a very practical book as well. And so I thank you for taking the time to do this, and look forward to, if you write another business book, having you back on again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marc. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Everyone have a wonderful weekend. We'll look forward to seeing you next Friday.